What was your biggest aaaah that's how that works moment? Credit to my husband for showing me that you have to stretch saran wrap to get it to cling. Game changer. I just learned that I don't know how to use saran wrap. Open road tolling happens because a car breaks a magnetic field and at that very time a camera takes a picture. I have met the guy knighted for making this happen at highway speeds. I grew up in a time and place without any real sex education. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I thought it was a myth that women had multiple holes to pee with and have sex with. First time I had a tampon in while peeing, I thought exact the phrase in this question. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I thought it was a myth that women had multiple holes to pee with and have sex with. Well, that's okay. Most boys wouldn't know. First time I had a tampon in while peeing, I thought exact the phrase in this question. Wait, you're a girl. Never knew why some yellow lights seemed to change so fast and others felt like they took forever. I thought it was just a flat amount of time for everywhere. Then Reddit told me that yellow lights stayed yellow for the speed limit divided by 10 in seconds. So 25 miles per hour speed limit means the light will stay yellow for 2.5 seconds. And 45 miles per hour means it will stay yellow for 4.5 seconds. It all makes sense now. Let me blow your mind some more. The lines between lanes on a multi-lane road go from dash to solid a short distance before each intersection with lights. The distance changes with speed limit too. If you're at the speed limit and you're not at the solid lines yet when the light turns yellow, you have enough distance to brake safely to a stop without entering the intersection. If you're already inside the solid lines, you should continue through the yellow light. It shouldn't turn red unless the street painters or more likely, the city planners were assholes. My wife bought a used Saturn. It wasn't the Econobox model, but I don't remember the name. Anyway, it was the highest trim level. She had a bunch of electrical problems to selling dealer took care of, but a year later, after Saturn was killed off, she needed recall work done. She went to drop off the car and forgot some paperwork in the car, so went out to get it. It was running. She had the keys in her hand and there were no keys in the ignition. Turns out she had remote start on it and didn't know it. The dealer sold her the correct remote and another set of keys. They programmed the remote but not the new keys. Told her to read the owner's manual to program them so she didn't get charged. That car had all kinds of high-end tech stuff you didn't see outside of luxury vehicles of the time, like 2 remotes for garage door openers built into the dome light area. We constantly found new things that were way ahead of their time on that car, but her favorite had to be the surprise remote start. A lot more specific than other comments, but I'll still share. I was a computer science student that was terrible at math. I tested into algebra when I got to college and spent a couple of years slowly working my way up the math ladder to pre-calculus. Meanwhile, I had taken several computer science courses and gotten decent at programming. I still sucked at math and had trouble understanding it, until one day in pre-calc when we were learning about matrices. The professor said matrices are used in lots of other fields, notably computer science, where they are known as two-dimensional arrays. My mind immediately exploded. I had no idea how matrices work but had done stuff using two-dimensional arrays. And in an instant all sorts of math started to click into place for me because I realized it had a programming equivalent. Ever since, math has made way more sense to me and clicked into place much easier for some reason. I was recently schooled that when I turn the burners down to 3 on my stove, it doesn't reduce the power to 0.3 of the total power, but rather cycles through full power, but just 30% of the time. My drunk mind was blown. I'm sitting over here trying to make sense of how this is true, then realized you're talking about an electric stove and not a gas one. My aircraft systems professor was a master of explaining things, even compared to other teachers. Valentine. He loved picking on random people. Myself usually, what are the 4 strokes of an engine? Well, there's intake, power, exhaust. Wait, I'm missing one. Wrong. It's suck, squeeze, bang, blow, intake, compression, power, exhaust. Put this in a Kentucky accent behind an astonishing handlebar mustache, and that was my teacher. Another good one. Valentine. What's the difference between deviation and variation? One's the difference between true north and magnetic north. The other one is magnetic interference from electronics on board the aircraft. Which one is which? I forget. What's in the airplane? Your deviance. What's outside the airplane? It varies. When I found out you can shrink comments on Reddit to make them not visible. Almost all of the IKEA products. A couple of weeks ago I put together a pair of IKEA chests of drawers for my mum. It was a pretty painless experience. All the parts fitted very well and the fastenings all fitted precisely. Today she presented me with some knockoff IKEA shoe storage thing from Easy Life. What a contrast. All of the fastenings worked on the same principle as the IKEA ones. But the engineering was just shocking. Nothing fitted exactly as it ought to, and the whole thing just looks awful. I love IKEA. I first got a McFlurry and I tried to drink through the spoon. And then it hit me. I had to take it out and scoop with the spoon. They look like that because they mount the spoons to the mixer and use them to mix the McFlurry. Just 2 days ago, I learned that the wax in candles is used as a fuel and not as a melting thing to slow down the burning of the wick. Should I mention that I have a chemistry degree? When I realized the switch thing on the bottom of the rear view mirror switches it to a darkened reflection. I superstitiously avoid using that feature except when absolutely necessary. Because I do not understand the physics behind it, I tipped the angle of the mirror. How in the am I still getting the same reflection? It's not right. I discovered, by accident, that when I push the car door unlock button 3 times, it makes all the windows go down. It's a very handy feature in warm weather. I got an Allen key with a piece of furniture. To help put it together, I had never seen one before. I put the long end in the screw and was twisting the hell out of the short end. I figured it was like a screwdriver and you would make tiny twists. I was 3/4 done and my fingers were dead when I asked myself would it be easier to twist the long end. Spoiler, it is way easier to use the long end. When my brother and I were really little we had an old family friend who would pick us up by the ears. He would grab each ear but then would also have us grab onto his forearms. It took me until I was much older to realize that he wasn't actually picking us up by our ears, but instead used his forearms to lift us up. Still a great trick to use with little kids. My now wife, then girlfriend, sometimes gets into a really foul mood, and I always thought I was doing something to piss her off. One day, her uncle was visiting when she got like this. He calmly told her to go get a snack. Turns out my wife gets really hangry, and has done so ever since she was a little girl. Everything suddenly made sense. Got a laptop for a job managing a cafe. Worked fine but it was inconvenient to use behind the counter and in the kitchen. After watching me struggle to use it standing up, the owner took it from me, rotated the screen and flipped it closed. It was a combo laptop tablet and I had no idea. 2 months. I just realized, this past spring at a party, that I've been using corkscrews on wine bottles all wrong. Turns out it is not correct form to screw it in by turning the bottle, then depressing the handles. I was publicly mocked. I deserved it. I'm 29. Bartender here. I didn't realize I was using a wine key waiter's friend wrong until I saw someone else doing it. I would just screw the corkscrew in, then just yank the cork out by pulling on the horizontally positioned handle. When I saw someone use the lever action properly I was like, huh, that's why it was so difficult. It never occurred to me that I could remove the oven door for easier cleaning until I watched this. I was like, WHAAAT. How differential steering works via watching a video from the 1930s on YouTube. I used to struggle to get the little cap off a new stick of deodorant. My wife walked into the bathroom as I was using my teeth to get it off one day. She took it from me and just spun the thing to raise the deodorant, which also pushed the cap off. She then turned around and walked out without saying a word, and that's how I know she loves me. But I kill spiders so we're even. Wasn't me, but me and my friend drove by a Target and he said, oh I get it. The Target logo is a target. I bought a car and was worried for months that my oil level never lowered. After 6 months I called my friend who sold me the car to ask about this. He explained that's how it's supposed to work. Then when I realized every single car I owned and my dad owned my whole life leaked oil. I bought some of those expensive windshield wipers that repel water and they sucked. It would smear the rain and the damn blade kept sliding off. I'd have to get off to put it back on. This went on for 4 to 5 months. One day I went to slide the blade back on that I realized it wasn't the blade, but the blade cover that I kept putting back. I have an air fryer. It's a pretty handy kitchen tool. The food goes in a basket which is attached to what's basically a metal bowl, so the grease and crumbs and whatever fall out of the basket and into the bowl. My only real complaint was it was hard to get the food out without a mess. You try and dump the basket onto a plate and the oil in the bowl still kind of runs out in a puddle. You can keep it away from the food if you're paying attention and wipe it up, but it's an annoyance. Then one day I mentioned it to my wife while making some fries. She just looked at me and said, "Why don't you take them apart?" And took the handle and pressed the button to separate the basket and bowl, dumped the fries out mess-free, and reconnects it back to the bowl. Now you might be thinking I'm an idiot for not knowing about that button. It's actually worse. I knew that button was there. I just used it to separate the pieces for cleaning, and it somehow never occurred to me to take them apart during use, despite the fact it's just one simple button that can be used with one hand. When I first moved into this condo, there was a microwave above the oven. For a long time, I couldn't figure out why the hell I couldn't turn on the light bulb above the stove. It was probably a good 6 weeks before I looked to the microwave and saw the light bulb button and pressed it. The irony in this comment is real. It was a real light bulb moment. For the longest time, I thought that when people talked about sticking their heads in the oven to kill themselves, that they just set it to broil and persevered through the pain. I only had electric ovens growing up. When I found out the truth, I had a good laugh at myself. My boyfriend just learned garbage disposals have a reset button after spending the better part of the evening dismantling our kitchen plumbing. I just assumed when he said it was broken that he already knew that, since he's pretty handy. I laughed a lot when I found out that the little gas pump on the dash tells me which side the gas flap is on. When we were like 28, I had a friend that would drive her outgoing mail to the post office every time she had to mail a bill. She had been doing this forever. One day I asked her why she doesn't mail them from her house. She looked puzzled and said, "Because if I put them in the mailbox, the mailman isn't going to just take them." I was like, "Why not?" She proceeded to tell me mailboxes didn't work that way. I told her they do if you put the flag up. She was floored. I asked, "What did you spend the last 28 years thinking the flag was for?" She said, "Decoration." That fractions are just division. I always struggled with fractions as a kid because the teachers would always give these extremely overcomplicated explanations of how they worked. Then one day I was trying to write 1/4 when I was programming and realized that 1 divided by 4 equals 1/4. I was working as a programmer by this time. When I learned the snap sound from snapping your finger comes from the finger hitting your palm fast, not from the finger snapping from your thumb. This also helps tremendously for when you teach people how to snap. Orbital mechanics. Thanks KSP. You can't just fly up to go to space. You need to go sideways real fast if you want to get in orbit. Ruined so many space movies for me. When I had sex for the second time. Seriously, I've never met someone who had fantastic sex when losing their virginity. Virginity sex is awful. My aha moment was learning why the little metal bits on the end of tape measures are always loose and jiggly. It's so that it can slide to compensate for the thickness of the metal stock depending which side of the edge you measure on. Genius bit of engineering that most people don't even realize is helping them out all the time. Turn signals. I couldn't understand how the car seemed to know where my dad was going to be turning, so I started to watch closely when we were getting in the car to see when he told the car where we were going so the car would know what turns to signal. I was amazed that it was this tiny little gesture he was making before every turn. I'm glad you discovered it at such a young age. Many people still haven't discovered how it works. For a while, my Christmas lights would randomly turn off. I couldn't figure out what it was. Was it the wireless switch? Was it some fault in the electricity? It would seemingly be random, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Then one day I was coming home from work and my neighbors got home at the same time. As they were locking their car doors, my lights turned off. I realized, that's how that works. Not sure if this counts, but I put all my pans in the nifty storage drawer of my oven. My oven doesn't have a storage drawer. It was the broiler. My broiler turns on automatically, or it did at the time. I have a gas stove. I opened the drawer to get a pan and screamed as flames suddenly appeared. Singed my hand right good too. Friggin' devil drawers. Lasers. I think my professor thought she was going to have to pick me up off the ground when I found out it's an acronym for the way they work. Light amplification through stimulated emission of radiation. I questioned literally everything in life that day.